I gave my sister $4,800 for rent and groceries. 2 days later, she posted a yacht party with the caption, "No broke vibes allowed." I sent her. She left me on read. So I forwarded the transfer receipt to her landlord along with the Instagram post. Now she's locked out, and I wake up every morning to random missed calls and messages. I, 29M, thought I was being a good brother when I handed over that money. My sister had called me crying about being behind on rent and running out of food. She painted this picture of desperation that hit me right in the gut. The eviction notice, empty fridge, choosing between utilities and groceries. I've always been the responsible one in our family, the one who had his finances together while she bounced from job to job, relationship to relationship. The transfer went through at 3:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. For $1,800, my entire emergency fund that I'd been building for 2 years. But family is family, right? She thanked me through tears, promising she'd pay me back once she got back on her feet. I told her not to worry about it, that we'd figure it out together. 2 days later, I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when her story popped up. There she was, champagne flute in hand, designer sunglasses reflecting the ocean, standing on what was clearly an expensive yacht. The caption made my blood run cold. No broke vibes allowed. Behind her, I could see at least a dozen people partying, expensive bottles scattered across pristine white surfaces. I stared at my phone screen for a full minute, certain I was seeing things wrong. Maybe it was an old photo she'd reposted? But no, the timestamp was from that morning. Less than 48 hours after sobbing to me about not being able to afford groceries, she was living it up like some social media influencer. My hands were shaking as I took a screenshot. Then I sent her a simple message, just a question mark. Nothing else. I watched as it showed delivered, then read. Minutes passed, then hours. She left me on read. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept refreshing her profile, watching as more yacht party content appeared. Her friends commenting about how amazing the trip was, how she deserved this after all her hard work. Hard work? The only work she'd done recently was manipulating me out of nearly $5,000. By morning, my hurt had crystallized into something harder, something angrier. I'd been played, and she didn't even have the decency to respond to my message. I started thinking about that sob story she'd fed me. The eviction notice, the empty fridge, the desperate circumstances. If she had money for yacht parties, what else had she lied about? I decided to find out. Her landlord's contact information wasn't hard to find. She'd given it to me months ago when she needed a reference for her lease. I'd even spoken to him before about her character, vouching for her reliability. The irony wasn't lost on me. I crafted a careful email. I explained who I was and attached 2 things. The bank transfer receipt showing the $4,800 payment I'd made to her for rent and groceries, and a screenshot of her yacht party post. I kept the message professional but clear. I was concerned about potential fraud and wanted to verify whether she'd actually paid her rent with the money I'd given her. His response came within an hour. She hadn't paid a dime toward rent. In fact, she was 3 months behind, and he'd been in the process of starting eviction proceedings. My money had gone straight to funding her luxury lifestyle, while she continued to dodge her actual responsibilities. The landlord thanked me for bringing this to his attention and mentioned he'd be taking immediate action. I felt a grim satisfaction reading those words. The call started the next morning at 6:23 a.m. My phone buzzed with her number, then again, then again. I let them all go to voicemail. The messages that followed were a masterclass in manipulation. First angry, demanding to know what I'd done, then shifting to wounded confusion about why I'd involved her landlord, then cycling back to rage. She'd been locked out of her apartment. The landlord had changed the locks and posted an eviction notice on her door. All her belongings were still inside, but she couldn't access them without paying the full amount she owed, which was now over $7,000 with late fees and legal costs. Her messages became increasingly frantic. She was staying with friends, but their patience was wearing thin. She needed her work clothes, her laptop, her medication. Why was I doing this to her? Couldn't I see she was suffering? I found myself checking my phone obsessively, not to respond, but to count the missed calls. 23 the first day, 31 the second. By the end of the week, I had over 100 voicemails I hadn't listened to. My mom called next. She'd heard about the situation and wanted to know why I was being so cruel. My sister had told her a version of events where I'd promised to help with rent, then maliciously contacted her landlord when she'd gone out with friends to celebrate getting her life back on track. I told my mom the truth. I sent her the same screenshots I'd sent the landlord. The silence that followed was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and tired. She said she didn't know what to believe anymore. Update 1. It's been 2 weeks since the lockout, and the calls haven't stopped. If anything, they've gotten more creative. She started calling from different numbers, friends' phones, work phones, even what I think might be burner phones. The messages have evolved too, cycling through every emotional manipulation tactic in the book. First came the guilt trips about family loyalty and how I was abandoning her in her darkest hour. Then the anger, with messages calling me vindictive and cruel. When those didn't work, she tried bargaining, promising to pay me back with interest if I'd just call off the landlord and help her get back into her apartment. The most recent development caught me off guard, though. She'd apparently hired a lawyer. Not to sue me. She couldn't, since I'd done nothing illegal, but to threaten the landlord with some kind of tenant rights violation. The lawyer sent me a cease and desist letter demanding I stop interfering with her housing situation. I forwarded that letter to the landlord along with a note explaining that I'd simply provided factual information he'd requested. His response was swift and brutal. He was countersuing for the full amount owed plus damages, and he had documentation of her fraudulent claims about having paid rent. My sister's Instagram had gone quiet after the yacht posts. No more luxury lifestyle content, no more party photos. Instead, there were vague posts about betrayal and family disappointment, thinly veiled attempts to paint herself as the victim without explicitly saying what had happened. The flying monkeys started appearing in my DMs. Mutual friends and distant relatives who'd heard her side of the story and wanted to tell me how disappointed they were in my behavior. I screenshotted those too, along with her original posts, and sent them back with a simple message. Here's what actually happened. Some apologized immediately. Others doubled down, insisting that families should stick together regardless of the circumstances. A few blocked me entirely. I found I didn't care as much as I thought I would. Update 2. A month in, and my sister made her most desperate play yet. She showed up at my workplace. I was coming back from lunch when I saw her in the lobby, looking disheveled and exhausted. She'd clearly been sleeping rough. Her usually immaculate appearance was replaced with wrinkled clothes and unwashed hair. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. She tried to approach me, but I kept walking toward the elevators. She followed, talking rapidly about how she needed to explain everything, how there had been a misunderstanding, how the yacht thing was a favor from a friend who'd paid for everything. I pressed the elevator button and stared straight ahead. Security arrived before the elevator did. Apparently, she'd been in the lobby for over an hour, asking for me despite not being on any visitor list. They escorted her out while she shouted about how I was destroying her life over a misunderstanding. That evening, she tried a new approach. Instead of calling me directly, she called my girlfriend. They'd only met a few times, but she poured out her sob story, explaining how I'd misunderstood an innocent Instagram post and ruined her life out of spite. She needed someone to talk sense into me, to help me see that I was being unreasonable. My girlfriend listened patiently, then asked a single question. Had she actually used the money I gave her for rent? The silence that followed was answer enough. When my girlfriend suggested she should focus on taking responsibility for her actions instead of blaming others, my sister hung up on her. The landlord's lawsuit was moving forward. My sister had burned through whatever money she'd had left on legal fees, and her lawyer had apparently dropped her when she couldn't pay his retainer. She was now representing herself, filing increasingly bizarre motions that the judge dismissed with what I imagined was barely concealed irritation. Meanwhile, I'd been getting updates from my mom about the family fallout. Some relatives were firmly on my sister's side, viewing my actions as a betrayal of family loyalty. Others had started asking uncomfortable questions about previous times they'd helped her out, wondering if their money had actually gone where she'd claimed. The family group chat had become a battlefield. Screenshots of arguments were being shared, old grievances were being dragged up, and everyone seemed to be picking sides. My dad, who'd remained neutral for weeks, finally weighed in with a message that surprised everyone. He was proud of me for standing up to manipulation, and it was about time someone held her accountable for her actions. Update 3. 2 months after the yacht incident, my sister's latest Instagram post appeared in my feed. It was a long, rambling caption about toxic family members and the importance of cutting negative people out of your life. She talked about learning hard lessons about who really had her back and discovering strength she never knew she had. The irony was rich, but what caught my attention was the location tag. She was back home, living with our parents. The luxury lifestyle had officially ended. My mom called that evening to explain the situation. My sister had been essentially homeless for weeks, bouncing between friends' couches until she'd exhausted all her options. She'd finally swallowed her pride and asked to come home, spinning a story about being the victim of circumstance and family betrayal. But our parents weren't the same people who'd enabled her behavior for years. The evidence I'd shared had opened their eyes to patterns they'd been ignoring. When she asked to move back home, they'd set strict conditions. She had to get a job within 2 weeks, contribute to household expenses, and enter counseling to address what they now recognized as a pattern of manipulation and financial irresponsibility. She'd agreed, but the reality was hitting hard. The job she'd found was retail work, a far cry from the lifestyle she'd been projecting online. Her Instagram posts had shifted from luxury content to motivational quotes about overcoming adversity, but the engagement had plummeted. Her followers had moved on to the next shiny thing. The missed calls had finally stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. No more voicemails, no more frantic messages, no more third-party interventions. At first, I thought it meant she'd finally given up. But then I realized what it actually meant. She'd found new targets. My mom mentioned that she'd been asking relatives for small amounts of money, always with detailed explanations about temporary setbacks and promises of quick repayment. The amounts were smaller now, 50 here, 100 there, but the pattern was the same. The only difference was that some family members were now asking follow-up questions and demanding receipts. The landlord's lawsuit had been settled. My sister couldn't pay the full amount, so they'd worked out a payment plan that would take her years to complete. Her credit was destroyed, making it nearly impossible for her to rent anywhere decent in the future. The yacht party that had cost me $5,000 was going to cost her much more in the long run. I found myself sleeping better at night, no longer jumping at every phone notification. The anger had faded into something quieter but more permanent, a clear understanding of who my sister really was and what she was capable of. The brother who would have given her everything without question was gone, replaced by someone who'd learned the hard way that enabling isn't the same as helping. My emergency fund was slowly building back up, and I'd set up new boundaries that my family was still adjusting to. When relatives asked for financial help now, I requested detailed explanations and documentation. Some were offended by my new approach, but others respected it. The ones who got angry about accountability were usually the ones who didn't deserve help in the first place. The yacht photos were still up on her Instagram, a permanent reminder of the day she chose to humiliate me instead of appreciating my help. But now they served a different purpose. They were evidence of her character that I could point to whenever anyone suggested I should give her another chance. Every morning, I wake up to silence instead of missed calls, and I'm reminded that sometimes the best thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their destructive behavior. My sister is learning to live with the consequences of her choices, and I'm learning to live without the weight of her problems on my shoulders. The family dynamics have permanently shifted, but that shift was long overdue. I'm no longer the family bank, and she's no longer the protected princess who could manipulate her way out of any situation. It took a yacht party and $5,000 to teach us both who we really were, but some lessons are worth the price.